The title is How to Conduct a Reproducible Meta-Analysis from Open Templates. And before showing the templates to you, I need to talk a bit more about what are meta-analysis and give a bit of context. My English is not very good, so if it's not understandable or something, just tell me. It's not. I have no problem to reformulate. So meta-analysis, simply it belongs to cumulative science. Very simply, you have historical effects and cumulative effects. Historical effects are like, for example, when we were in the lockdown in France, we had a problem, like we had a shortage of dough to bake, and it was like a historical fact. I think that if we have another lockdown, we won't have any more shortage like this one. So when researchers studied it, they studied it as an historical fact, and it's not reproducible. And meta-analysis analyze reproducible cumulative effects. And also systematic reviews belongs to cumulative science too. Okay, so for some, meta-analysis is the highest level of scientific evidence. So we have a pyramid of the hierarchy of scientific evidence, and meta-analysis are in the top, and in the bottom you have case reports, opinion papers, and letters. So in an idealistic world, meta-analysis are in the highest level of scientific evidence, but we will see in the next slides that it is not always the case. It's not obvious. So we need to improve our meta-analysis. This is the highest level of scientific evidence, and the important point here is that it allows recommendations to be made. For example, the Cochrane review make recommendations out of meta-analysis, and this recommendation is very important. For example, they have recommendations for medication, for psychotherapy, for depression, anxiety, etc. So they need to be sure that meta-analysis show a true effect and a strong effect of this type of psychotherapy or medication, etc. The goal of a meta-analysis is to see if an effect is strong or not, is true or not. But another question we ask in meta-analysis is how the effect varies between studies. So it is called heterogeneity. And if the effects varies a lot, it has a lot of heterogeneity, it may be due to moderators or publication bias. So we need to understand why the effect varies between studies. A feature of meta-analysis is that they are trendy nowadays. So if we see this picture from science, from a study in science, you see that in 95, there were like no meta-analysis at all that were published. And nowadays it's more like an exponential. We have a lot of meta-analyses that are published. And this is just an information because I don't know the reason why, but 1/3 of all meta-analyses are from China, but I don't know why. And one last thing is that the best practices of conducting meta-analysis are constantly being updated, which means that every 3 months or 6 months, we have a new tool to assess publication biases, to make new models of meta-analysis. And you have a conference. Actually, this is a screenshot of the YouTube page of the Aix-Marseille. This is a conference in January or February, and they show all the new tools that are used in meta-analysis. It's free to go and see, and like it's on YouTube, so it's very easy to find. And the next one, if you want to participate, is at the end of February. If you want to register, it's free and on YouTube. So it was the introduction. Now we're going to the sad part of the presentation. I will show you two meta studies about meta-analysis. The first one is called Methodological Quality of Meta-Analysis Indexed in PsycInfo, Leads for Enhancement, a meta-epidemiological study. So it's an analysis of the quality of meta-analysis that were published in PsycInfo, not only psychological meta-analysis. And what researchers found, this study was published in 2020, so last year. They found that 95% of the 206 meta-analyses were rated as critically low quality. And in detail, they found that only 11% of meta-analyses published a research protocol. It means that only for 11% of the meta-analysis, we know what researchers did in their meta-analysis, how they conducted the meta-analysis. So this is a bit problematic. The second study is called an empirical review of research and reporting practices in psychological meta-analysis, and it's again published. It was published in 2020. Researchers took 384 published psychological meta-analyses. They analyzed them, and they found that there are several research practices conducted by meta-analysts that are ultimately not reported. Some aspects of meta-analysis research appear to be conducted at disappointingly low rates, and the adoption of the reporting standards, including the meta-analytic reporting standards, the MARS, has been slow to non-existent within psychological meta-analytic research. So people do things they don't say they will do. They don't do things they will say they do. And when we try to help them do better and write better meta-analysis, they often don't use the guidelines we provide to them. So this is a big problem in meta-analysis research. So how we can improve it? So there are some features of a high quality meta-analysis. For me, it's just my opinion on this and how I created these templates. And maybe you will find other features that we can discuss after this presentation. The first one is that high quality meta-analyses have to follow the standard reporting guides, for example, the MARS, or in psychology, we often use PRISMA guidelines. I will show you how it works after. They are transparent and reproducible from start to the end. And since we are in a reproducibility session, I think that you know how important it is that a study is reproducible and, more importantly, a meta-analysis. They seek to reduce and examine publication bias. We will talk a lot about it after. And they are not themselves victims of publication bias because, you know, most published papers, to publish a paper, we need to find positive results. It's very hard to publish non-positive results, and especially hard for meta-analysis. So we really need to address this issue. And we found a way via the register report format. So I'll talk a bit about it after. So our templates, they are in the format of one manuscript, one supplementary, one Excel file, and one error code. In the manuscript, it's in the format of introduction, method, result, and discussion. The supplementary has templates for email, checklists, diagrams, and additional resources. The Excel template, it's a template where we can directly code the data, and the error code provide an output, a PDF output based on the Excel file. And so you just have to copy paste the outputs to the result section. It's very easy to use. And I made some screenshots after, a bit about register report. If you don't know how register report works, the idea is that you ask a question, does this effect exist? And you write the method, like how will I show these effects with the method, like designing the inclusion and exclusion criteria, etc. And then you write the introduction and method sections. You send it to the editor, to the journal, and they review it, and they say, okay, with your method, you will be able to answer your question. Then you can collect the data and analyze the data. You write your report, the result and discussion sections. And after that, you send it again to the editor, and the editor will accept the final manuscript based on how you deviate or not from what was registered in the first stage. So if you didn't deviated from what you was meant to do at the beginning, he will publish it, or she will publish it independently of the results, if the results are positive or negative. So it's a way to overcome the publication bias, like we publish only positive results. I hope it was clear. So here is a screenshot of the main manuscripts. So it's the introduction, and in plain text we have what is proposed for writing, so you don't have to change it if you want, but if you want to delete it, feel free to delete it. And highlighted in square brackets, you have what needs to be adapted. So for example, if you want a name for your meta-analysis, you just change the construct name, and like you have a personality traits and values, a creational meta-analysis, and this is how you name your own manuscript. In this main manuscript, you already have tables and figures that are provided. For example, this table is a table of all studies that have to be included in the meta-analysis. You have the number of the study, the article, the number of participants, etc., etc. Figures are automatically made with the error markdown scripts, so you just have to copy paste it. And then you have in smaller fonts indication on how to use the model. For example, this indication explains to you what should be in the analysis section. So it's very easy for you to adapt this section to your need, or to delete it, or to add another section if you want. So this is for the main manuscript. And now let's see the features of a high quality meta-analysis. So I talk a bit about the checklist. The Prisma checklist is very easy to follow. It's just you say, so, oh, sorry for the bad quality. Title, okay, title is page 1, abstract is page 2, etc. So you have like 30 items, and you say in the page where you have the item. A transparent diagram on inclusion and exclusion criteria. It also comes from the Prisma guidelines, and it's very easy to use. You say, okay, from this database, I found that many results. I exclude that many for that reason, that many for that reason, etc. And at the end, you have the studies included in your review. And it's very important because this is about transparency, like you are transparent on how and why you excluded or included your studies. Data sharing. So here is how the Excel file looks like. You have the article, the study, the sample, who coded it, when, who verified it, when, the number of participants, the age of the participants, and then you have the main effect, the moderators, etc. at the end of this line 3. Reproducible analysis. So if you don't change anything in line 3, the error code works perfectly. But if you change anything in this line 3, you have to adjust the error code to what you changed. So just be careful about it. And testing for publication bias. The error code produced automatically the results of publication bias analysis. And for this method, for this method, the 3-parameter selection model, the PET piece, the P uniform, the trim and fill, etc. So you just need to change the results here with what you found. This is very easy. I added 2 new features. The first one is about the sufficiency of statistical power. It's in the form of a visualization of funnel plots. And for example, in this meta-analysis is about the but you are free effects, which is an effect when you say to someone, but you are free to refuse or accept, people tend to accept more the requests. This is the theory, but in practice, it's far more complicated. And we found that most studies who studied this effect were not enough powered, so they are in the red area. So if the effect exists, they cannot show the effect. And in this meta-analysis, most studies are in the green area or yellow area. So it is possible to replicate the effect if the effect exists. And you have below, and you have below here the reproducibility index that is near 100%. So if we reproduce the effect with the mean sample size of all studies included in the meta-analysis, we will have 100% chance to replicate the effect if the effect exists. And this effect is about the vicarious cognitive dissonance, if I'm correct. And about publication of non-significant studies, we have 2 templates for emailing authors. One about the missing data, so to ask to provide raw data. And the second one is for unpublished studies. So if researchers have published a study in this for this effect, they might have other experiments that were not published. So we have to ask them these experimentations, because that might inflate false positive. Okay, so we have two meta-analysis templates in this format. One is for experimental meta-analysis, and experimental meta-analysis compares difference between two groups, experimental group and control group mostly. And the aim is to find the effects of the experiment, and it's based on HG. And if you don't know what it is, it's the same as Cohen's d. It's just a correction for Cohen's d. And about the correlational or psychometric meta-analysis template, it measures the relationship between two constructs, and it's based on Pearson's error. I assume that you know what is a Pearson's error. It's for correlations. And what is interesting with this template is that it can assess interrelationships between subconstructs. For example, if you have a meta-analysis between personality traits and values, you want the overall correlation between both constructs, but you also want the correlations between neuroticism and tradition, or extraversion and altruism, or everything you want, but also between neuroticism and extraversion and altruism and tradition, for example. So all the interrelationships. And what is interesting too is that it takes into account the reliability of measurement scales in measuring the relationship between constructs. What it means is that if you have an article who measures neuroticism with a Cronbach's alpha of like 40, which is a very bad alpha, and another one with a Cronbach's alpha of 80, which is a very good alpha, the meta-analysis would put more weights on the good article, the reliable article, than into the bad article or the not reliable article. So the outputs will be different that if we don't use the reliability scales. So it's a form of taking care of publication bias. This is a type of publication bias. The templates are available at this link, so it's very easy to find. You just go on Google and write MGTO meta-analysis, and it's the first results. It's very easy to find, and here is a screenshot of this page. And it's like just links for the experimental meta-analysis register report template, main manuscript, supplementary, coding sheet, cloud folder, and in the cloud folder you have the R script. And it's the same for the correlational meta-analysis templates. And below these links, you will also find a Google Sheet where you have all the journals who accept meta-analysis in the format of register report, which is a lot of journals don't accept register reports. So look carefully about this list, because a lot of journals don't accept it. There is also another possibility to submit your meta-analysis in the format of register reports, and it is called peer community in register reports. It's not only for meta-analysis, it's for all register reports. And the idea is like you have an editor, but the editor is from your community. He is not an editor of one particular journal. And you and the editor will try to find reviewers for your analysis or for your paper. And if reviewers and editors think that the article can be published, they will try to find a journal to publish your article, but you also can publish anywhere you want. It's like a preprint for register reports. It's a bit weird, but it's like it's a community. So you just send your paper to them. They will try to improve it, and then you will submit to another journal. Yes, some journals are affiliated to peer community in register reports, so it could be easier to publish a meta-analysis in the format of register report via this institution, via this community, instead of trying to find your own journal. So you can like take a chance. So yeah, there are several meta-analyses that are based on this template that were already published. So the first one here was published before we created the template, and it was the original paper which we based or templates on. And yeah, there are also other published meta-analysis, and some of them are in preparation. And if you want to make your own meta-analysis, if it's possible to tell us, so that we can keep track on who use our templates, so like we can add them to the list. And you can also participate to improve the templates. So in the beginning of the manuscript, the main manuscript, you have a contributor list. And if you think you can add values to the manuscript, you can comment the manuscript, you can comment the error code and etc. What you want, what you can, and add your name in the contributors list so that we will improve the templates over time. Okay, and now we go back to another sad part of the story. 2 days ago, I found a Twitter post from Kyle Sheldrick. The post, the Twitter thread was posted the 22 September, but I just found it 2 days ago, and I will read it to you. He said, "I want to talk about this piece we just published in Nature Medicine. Multiple major meta-analyses concluded that ivermectin reduced the rate of deaths from COVID by half to 2/3. Ivermectin is a medication for respiratory disease. This was in part based on simply fabricated data. We ask, how did this happen? When authors of meta-analysis combine studies, they apply tools that examine whether studies are at risk of bias. Is the research the authors describe a good way of answering the scientific question? These tools do basically nothing to examine if the authors are lying." And this is correct. If we go to this publication bias analysis, they analyze the asymmetry of the curve. Like if we have too many studies on one side to the other side of the curve, they do multiple analyses, but they assume that the data are correct. So it's just, they can't see if the data are faked. And then he said, "It's uncomfortable to consider that other medical researchers might be publishing straight up fake fraudulent research," and it is uncomfortable. But we have examined dozens of ivermectin trials, and many are indisputably fake, including virtually all miracle claims. This is important not just because of ivermectin, though that is important. Millions were treated based substantially on fake research. It's important because it could happen again. So we propose a solution. Yeah, he proposed a solution. The days of the traditional meta-analysis are dead. Future meta-analysis should review raw data for every trial, even if IPD techniques are not used. MAs amplify trials' impact on treatments. They shouldn't include fake data. What he means here is, I think it's Bornstein who said that meta-analysis is very easy to understand. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you have one bad study in the included in the analysis, you will have bad results at the end. So we need to be very, we need to take care of what we include or not in our meta-analysis. And he said that we need to review raw data. And one possibility to do it is by using these templates for email, like email every authors and make sure they have the raw data. And if they haven't, be very careful of if we think we have to include the studies in our meta-analysis or not. And for the story in this meta-analysis about the Butterfly effect, when we created this meta-analysis, we found that the original study was completely fabricated, fake data. So we really struggled to see what we could do about that, and we decided to treat it as a moderator. We have a moderator that is called with Guéguin. Guéguin is the name of the person who fabricated the data, and half of the studies were made with him. So we decided to treat it as a moderator with Guéguin and without Guéguin, to see if there is a change in the effect found with and without this author, who is a problematic author in this paradigm for this effect. So we found that the effect was the same with or without him, and the reason about that is that most of the studies are not powered enough to detect the effect anyway, so it doesn't really matter for this meta-analysis. But what we have to understand with this story is that we really need to be careful about what we put inside the meta-analysis, and we really need to understand how the data were created, how they were collected, and how we include them in our meta-analysis. Yeah, and the reason for this is that for some, it's the highest level of scientific evidence, and if we have to treat meta-analysis as the highest level of scientific evidence, we really need to be sure that the data that are included in our meta-analysis are not fake. And the reason is that because people make recommendations out of it, so it has really impact on people. So we need to be very vigilant about it. Thank you. So here is the source if you want to cite the meta-analysis, and if you have any questions, I will be pleased to answer them. Thank you very much.